we kind of know that if there is a UFO program, it's being run partially by the CIA. But the question stands, why would you hire Bob Lazar to your top secret UFO reverse engineering program if your good friend, or his good friend, John Lear, was a babbling UFO nut who has a UFO blog?
The more we learn about the psychological warfare and the counterintelligence stuff, like in this current UFO state we're in, the more light it shines on the Bob Lazar story in, what was it, 1980 or something, 1990? What was it?
87.
87?
Yep.
So like, apparently he was the guy who first came to Area 51, blew the whistle on Area 51. But then I think this was all part of your documentary. Was this a part of your Townsend Brown documentary?
It was, yeah.
So like, I think one of the questions you asked in the Townsend Brown documentary, which was brilliant, was why would the CIA let a guy come in who has this crazy history?
Yep.
Right. I think, and another thing that happened was, I think he like recently gotten a divorce with his previous wife, who then like killed herself.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
She like went in her car in her garage and let her car run until like she suffocated. This was like a week after they got a divorce.
Oh no.
I think Bob also owned a strip club in Vegas.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, he did.
And then what were there?
I think a brothel, not just.
Oh, it was a brothel.
Yeah, he owned a brothel. Yeah.
So the CIA is gonna go out and find and to think they're not gonna do a background check and find that kind of stuff if it's the CIA at their most top secret facility in America.
Well, you've seen Oppenheimer, right?
Yeah.
So you remember that Matt Damon's character, Leslie Groves,
yes,
who's running basically the entire Manhattan Project from like a national security standpoint. And he says, I didn't hire Oppenheimer in spite of his socialist sympathies. I hired him because of them. And so you hire people when it comes to some of these more secret programs, sometimes if they do have compromise on them, because they're more easily controllable. So that wouldn't necessarily cut against the whole Bob Lazar story.
For them,
that's an argument for them hiring him.
Okay,
but
and discrediting him if he ever decides to spill the beans.
Yeah, and there's even so what I was saying in that documentary is John Lear is a CIA cargo jet pilot or whatever,
right?
And the son of Bill Lear, who created the first business, basically private jet in the U.S. Who's known as the autopilot wizard, and actually worked with Thomas Townsend Brown. So he comes from this like aerospace dynasty,
right?
And he affiliated with the CIA. And says he disaffiliated in '83, but definitely was still flying cargo jets for them, like into the mid '80s at least. So my question is, like, we kind of know that if there is a UFO program, it's being run partially by the CIA, and the CIA has a part in it. And so if you're the CIA, why do you continue, unless you're extremely dysfunctional and not coordinated, why do you continue to pay this guy, is flying cargo jets for you if he's leaking your most vital, important secrets? Because John Lear put all of the files around Bob Lazar on George Knapp's desk. He broke the story.
Yeah.
So why would you pay a guy who's leaking your crown jewel secrets? So that's one question. And then John Lear also had a UFO blog before, and was friends with Bob Lazar. And there's some story that Bob Lazar says all this UFO stuff's crazy and wacky and bullshit before he gets hired by Area 51 and S4. But the question stands, why would you hire Bob Lazar to your top secret UFO reverse engineering program if your good friend, or his good friend, John Lear, was a babbling UFO nut who has a UFO blog? Like, you'd obviously find that in a background check, right?
Yeah.
So like, there's a lot to me that points to the CIA wanting the Bob Lazar story out. Again, that doesn't mean the details of the Bob Lazar story are not incredibly interesting. And maybe it's 95% true and 5% false. And maybe this Billy Meyer's sports model that he worked on was real. I don't know. Maybe Gravity A and Gravity B are high-level frameworks that if you are working on a secret UFO program, you need some initiate, STEM student to start to develop an interest in, but you need to protect this from getting into adversary hands. So you put it out through this quacky person who is discreditable in Bob Lazar. And so it's kind of this limited hangout of a person where you can always retract it. You can always point to, he say he faked his MIT, educational credentials.
Yeah.
And you'd say all this stuff about Bob. You'd say the brothel thing, but maybe there are elements of it that, are very real. So I think it's this incredibly intriguing story. And what I want to be clear about is I think like the Corbell and Georgia Knapp reporting on it are awesome. Like, I think we should be looking into this stuff. But to me, if you're not thinking about it through a meta lens of like, the CIA probably wanted elements of this out, I think you're losing the plot. I think you're going to fall for you can't take the thing at face value. You need to understand that it's being pushed for some reason. And I think there's even a John Lear interview where I believe he says a guy named, I think it was like an Admiral McClellan. He says that this guy who was part of like legacy UFO efforts told him that he needed to leak the Lazar story because he knew that it was discreditable, but that it was mostly true, but also discreditable. And so there's literally a Lear interview, because Lear was clearly kind of unhinged and a little, crazy himself, where he's just saying what I'm telling you now, which is that the Lazar story, again, there could be elements of truth, but it was put out because it was discreditable. And I think that's the way a lot of this stuff works.
So what was the benefit of putting it out? Was it to recruit new talent?
Tons. So it's like, if you want to throw the adversary off the trail or like keep things fundamentally protected, but have initiates, develop intrigue and want to be recruited or whatever. Like, it's like the perfect way to do it.
Yeah.
So it's like tech protection, it's adversary signaling, it's recruitment, it's increasing the surface area. It's if you expect a leak in the future, you can manage that leak because you're like conditioning people and like softening the blow for something you expect to leak in the future anyways. There's so many reasons to get in front of and do something like that. And Ben Rich, who was, president of Lockheed Skunk Works, their most secretive, advanced aerospace aircraft division at the time, responsible for, the SR-71 and, U-2. He was complaining at the time how he was basically saying like, I have to spend tons and tons of money on tech protection because the F-117A, which was their first stealth fighter, had just crashed in Bakersfield in 1986. Lear actually established credibility with KLAS, with George Knapp's, news station by giving them information on that F-117A.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there's some interesting ties there. The final thing is John Lear and Jim Goodall, his buddy, had been camping outside of Area 51 for the better part of a decade, taking pictures of all these advanced recon stealth craft. And so the security knew him. They all knew who he was. So it's like, if he's leaking stuff, it's probably for a reason. And so I think, people like Ben Rich were smart, really smart. Ben Rich used to call UFOs unfunded opportunities. And I think, he was kind of using John Lear to those ends, if that makes sense. Again, I don't know if you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say that we're not, reverse engineering UFOs in sort of, secret compartments of the government. But that's the way I think you need that meta lens to look at it through, if that makes sense.
And on my list, on top of my to-do list is read the book that Jacques Vallée wrote about this stuff, where he talks about Bob Lazar drinking something weird or something like that.
Yeah, Messengers of Deception. Yeah. Jacques Vallée's always, I've had a bunch of conversations. I love that guy. French godfather of UFOs.
Right.
And he's always thought Bob Lazar was like just completely full of shit. Which I think there are more elements of truth to it. And there's actually a great movie coming out about Bob Lazar by my buddy Luigi, and it's called Project Gravatar. And I do think it's actually going to corroborate that Lazar probably was at Area 51.
Really?
Yeah. And
he's working on it with Lazar?
He's working on it with Lazar.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's going to be epic. It's going to be really awesome. But yeah, so in Messengers of Deception, Jacques Vallée says, and what about the liquid that Bob Lazar said he was, meant to drink or whatever, and the memory lapses that it caused. And immediately my mind goes to MK Ultra, and I'm like, and Lazar admits that, and I think he's admitted it to Luigi, and he'll talk about this, that the fact that they like made him drink a weird liquid and he'll forget certain things. And so something kind of, weird going on there. I don't know what it is.
A psyop wrapped in a mystery, wrapped in another psyop, wrapped in some sort of strategic deception.
Yeah,
I love what Annie Jacobson says in her book about when they're first flying the first jet planes out of Area 51. The CIA pilots had to bring gorilla masks in the cockpit.
Oh,
remember that?
Oh no!
Because the CIA pilots, when they were flying those first jet planes, in case they came in visual distance of a civilian airplane,
Yeah.
they had to put on the gorilla masks.
No way.
How crazy is that?
That's crazy.
That's my favorite one.
Oh, that's so fast. Is that in Area 51?
That's in Area 51. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.